Today's guest is Sean Trethaway, a magician, author, and father with a life story that reads like an adventure novel. Born in California, Sean's journey has taken him from building a cement sailing boat in his backyard and sailing to Tahiti to becoming a magician for over 40 years, as well as authoring 6 books. His life has been a series of pivotal moments, from personal challenges to profound realizations. Sean's also a dear friend, and it's a pleasure to share him with you today. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. Great to be here, Ash.
Yeah, really wonderful to have you here. So, Sean, so you grew up in California?
I did indeed. I was born in Inglewood, California.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to LA, you probably went to Inglewood.
Yeah. Tell me about Inglewood.
Well, that's where the LA airport is.
Right.
And I was born in the 50s, so it was a completely different place than it is now. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that house still there?
The house is still there, yeah, although the neighborhood has gone through many changes. And recently, well, in the last few years, they built the new Rams football stadium in Inglewood.
Right.
And just down the street from where I was born, actually. And that is completely changing the whole surrounding area. It's, I guess, gentrifying the whole surrounding area,
Mm.
along with the changes that that has brought. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I was curious what that might do to the real estate value, having a football stadium go up nearby.
exactly. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm. Mm. Progress can't stop it.
just keeps happening.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. One of those things that we might try to stop, but we can't. Well, I can't anyway. You're a magician, so you might be able to.
No, I don't try. I mean, you can complain and think about how things used to be in the old days and all that,
Mm.
but it's pretty pointless, really. I like to just embrace whatever's going on now and see what I can do with that.
Yeah, yeah, I get that sense with you as well that you well it's probably something you had to learn along the way, was it? To just embrace what's happening and
Oh,
go,
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And, speaking of that, changes in areas, I would just, before we start completely, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional caretakers of the land that I'm on, the Gubby Gubby or Cubby Cubby tribe, or
mm,
people who were here for many, many years before anybody, and acknowledge their ancestry, past, present, and future.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Yes, and acknowledging the Gadigal people whose country I'm sitting on right now. And yeah, it's ancient wisdom that I will never be able to comprehend, the level of understanding and insight and consciousness that
Mm.
they had in those times when, yeah, it was a very different way of life and taking care of the land. So thank you. And
You
so,
reminded me of it because there are so many changes,
mm,
in this area, certainly from when they were first here, when
yeah,
I first came here to now. And
yeah,
and same with where you are.
mm,
So
mm,
many changes.
yeah, yeah. And for the listeners, Sean's has been living for quite a while in Noosa, which is
Noosa
on
Shire,
the
yep,
Sunshine Coast in
that is
Australia.
correct.
And Sean, what was there's a few turning points that you've put in your notes. I thought maybe we'll if we lead towards the cement sailing boat and going to Tahiti, and I thought we'll start with what was life like before going to Tahiti.
Okay, yeah. Well, as a young man growing up in LA, I was trying to get into the acting scene. So I was in all that, Hollywood scene and all that kind of area. I was a stoner, smoking pot every day, LSD every weekend, any drug I could get my hands on, I was into it. And in my last year of high school, my sister, Roxanne, had gone to Tahiti with my father on his cement sailboat that he'd built. And she met her future husband, Jeannot Ray, and they came back to LA with the view of building a cement boat for themselves to sail back to Tahiti where they would live. And they invited me to join them in building and sailing that boat. So it took us about 3 years to build the boat. And then right at the crucial moment when we were about to sail, or not right when we were about to sail, but just before we were about to sail, I got cold feet and decided I didn't want to go. And that was a real turning point for me, because if I'd stayed in LA, I doubt if anything in my life would have changed. I mean, obviously there would have been changes, but certainly not, what I've become today.
Mm.
And at that point, I remember very clearly my brother-in-law took me into the bedroom and he sat me down, and he, with tears in his eyes, he just said, "Sean, you've got to do this. You have to do it. It's it's an opportunity that may never come for the rest of your life, and it will change the rest of your life." And he was right. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Have you thought about why you were going through cold feet at that moment?
Oh yeah. I had a girlfriend, and she was ready to dump me, and I knew that anyway.
Mhm.
But
Uh-huh.
at that age, I was madly in love, and I didn't want to leave her, and it just was, even though it would have been pointless to stay, because as I said, she was past me now
Mm.
then. And yeah, so that was mainly it. I imagine I was a little bit scared as well, just back in those days, in the old days, when you went somewhere like to a foreign country, you were completely cut off from your full system.
Mm.
A lot of people now may not understand, the younger people, I should say, that back then, uh, if you could find a phone that you could make an international phone call on, it would cost between $3 and $5 a minute, which was more like $30 and $50 now. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to write letters, they were in the mail for a couple of weeks before they got to their destination, and a couple of weeks before you got your reply. So you really were completely cut off from the rest of the world and any support, group that you may have or whatever.
Mm.
So in big ways, that really taught me, especially when I left Tahiti and went on my own to New Zealand after that. It really taught me that I could be self-reliant, which is a big lesson for a young person to learn. That completely on my own, all responsibility on me to stay alive and, do whatever I was going to do, and realize that I could actually do that.
Mm.
And that was a huge turning point in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial piece that you need to get to, is the understanding of
Mm,
how to be on our own, how to survive on our own. And then I guess once you get that down, how to thrive on your own.
yes.
Mm. And so the making of a cement sailboat, and I guess the displacement is the key with that, being able
That's
to.
what it is. I mean, people think cement, and they think cement shoes that, somebody might use to
Yeah.
sink someone in the ocean. But when you think about it, I mean, steel is heavier than cement, and that floats. So the cement is, it's a thick wall,
Mm.
but as long as there's, as you said, enough of a shell, enough air inside, it floats just fine. And it's sealed on the outside, so the water doesn't soak in, obviously.
Mm. And when you
Yeah.
were traveling, did you have any issues with sailing with?
Well,
Yeah.
we had a lot of issues.
Uh,
um, we built the boat right near the LA airport. Actually, it's now a parking lot where we built our boat. They tore all the houses down and put a parking lot up. Um, but we built it and then had it taken to Marina del Rey, which is just nearby, just south of the, or sorry, north of the LA airport. And then we put it in the water, and 2 weeks later, we sailed to Tahiti. Normally, when somebody builds a boat of any kind, they put it in the water and they sail it around for maybe a year or so to, check out if anything might go wrong. But we didn't. We just got in the boat and sailed. Of course, I knew nothing. And my brother-in-law was a sailor, like from a very early age. He'd been on boats all his life. And my sister also was a sailor. So I just trusted in them that they knew what they were doing. So some of the things that went wrong, our main mast was a decommissioned 65-foot telephone pole. So that's a big telephone pole, and that was right down through the main part of the hull and the deck, and in my bedroom actually. And then there are guy wires that help hold it, fasten it to the boat itself. And that's what holds it up, is because these guy wires. And one of the guy wires snapped in the middle of a raging storm, like a huge, if you could imagine any crazy big storm you've ever seen in a movie or television, it was worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were tossed and turned. That snapped, so the mast was flopping back and forth, which threatened to tear the whole hull apart. And of course, it happened at like 3 a.m. So we, first of all, I heard this huge bang right next to me because the pole was in my room, and we all just jumped up, went up on deck, and my brother-in-law, who I said is an amazing captain, he just said, "You do this, you do that, you do this," and we ran around, pouring rain, all of us naked, lightning and thunder all around us. My friend Doug, who was an Australian guy, is about 6'5". Our job was to bring in the front jib. So he went out the front of the it's been a long time since I've been sailing, so I can't remember all the terms. The
Yeah.
pole out the front, which the jib was attached to, and he's pulling it in and handing it to me, and I'm stuffing it down into a locker. And as we're going, the boat was, like taking dips into the water, so far into the water that the water was up to his neck. I mean, it was insane. And none of us had safety wires on, which I found out later is pretty common practice on a sailboat. You
Yeah.
have a safety wire that attaches you to the boat in case you go overboard. So anyway, we got everything, all the sails down, and just went downstairs and had hot cocoa and rode out the storm. But that meant that we didn't have a main sail for the rest of the trip. We did have, it was a catch, so we did have another smaller sail and the jib.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the main things that went wrong. And it was also a really defining moment in that that's probably the closest I've ever come to death, like that, like right there in my face. This could be it. Like I
Yeah.
thought it was it. We all did. We all thought that was it.
And did
And
that
as you
affect you?
know, that's a real wake up moment.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious. How was that a wake up call for you?
Just being a young 18-year-old, you think you're immortal,
Mm.
and you're not. And sorry, I was 20 at the time by then.
Mhm.
But when you're young, you do such stupid things, thinking, you don't even think about it, the consequences. But that kind of woke me up, and especially being out at the ocean, knowing that there was nothing we could do, because the ocean is in charge. There's nothing you can do when you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on a tiny boat. The boat was 52 feet, but out in the middle of the ocean, that's nothing.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, that really woke me up to that I wasn't immortal.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what effect do you think that's had on your life since then?
I wouldn't say that I take less risks, but I am a little more conscious of risks, and of whether I'm doing something foolish or something that's going to be worth it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's fairly safe.
Mhm.
But because we lost our mast, we also lost our main engine when we got to the doldrums, which is an area at the equator where there's no wind. We normally you would motor through it. So, but we didn't have a motor, so we just had to drift through it. It took an extra 2 weeks. So a trip that normally would take about 3 weeks took nearly 6 weeks.
Right.
So it was a long trip.
Mm-hmm.
And because we didn't have our motor, we didn't have our deep freeze, so we had to eat and throw away any food that we had deep frozen. We couldn't use our radio anymore. Well, we could use it, but only we had a battery, but it wouldn't be recharged. So we used the radio once a day to send a message out to the world, not knowing if anyone's hearing it, giving our approximate location just in case we got, didn't have any whatever, and they could send somebody to look for us. And all of our, we had no radar, so all of our location was done by sextant. So it was all done by, navigation by the stars, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which really amazed me.
And so did you learn to do that, or you left
I
that?
didn't actually do it. My brother-in-law, that's quite complicated. My brother-in-law took classes and learned how to do it before we left. So we had a really nice sextant. He had all the books and the workbooks, and he got us there. So it worked.
Yeah.
One other thing that happened was that our hydraulic system broke. I mean, we really could have tested the boat out a little bit before we left, but we didn't. So the hydraulic system broke. So we tied ropes to the rudder under the water, and sitting at the helm, at the wheel, you pull one rope, you pull the other rope, and that's how you steered the boat, which was fine if the wind was blowing steadily. You could just tie the ropes off, but there were times when you had to sit there and just fight it, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah, what comes to mind is the creativity and the ingenuity required to be able to get through something like that.
Yeah, again, it was my brother-in-law was really a top sailor, is still.
Right. And did they stay in Tahiti when you got there?
They did. They did end up splitting up eventually, and my sister now lives in Los Angeles or in Orange County. But yeah, but he still lives in Tahiti and has a family there, and I occasionally get an email from him.
Right. And so you went to New Zealand,
I lived
backpacking?
in Tahiti for 6 months, and then I went on to New Zealand and hitchhiked around there for another like 3 or 6 months, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then somehow at some point you ended up in Australia.
Yeah, my dad was in New Zealand on his boat, and he was going to Australia, and he offered me a ride, and I said, sure, I'll take it. So I came with him, yeah, through another storm. He'd been sailing all his life in the South Pacific, worst storm he'd ever been in. I think we went through a bit of a cyclone. It was really crazy again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I haven't really been sailing since.
Right.
Not that they were bad experiences. I'm just not really a sailor. It's not really my thing. He
Yeah.
loved it. He thought it was amazing and fantastic to be out in that huge storm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I would like the feeling of having gotten through the storm.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite possibly could have been in a lot of resistance whilst the storm was happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at some point you made it to Noosa.
Yes. So I lived in Brisbane. The day that I arrived, we went to Sydney, and I hitchhiked up to Brisbane to look up a friend that I'd met in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And the day I arrived there, I knocked on his door, and his room flatmate answered the door, and she and I had like love at first sight. We just fell in love right at the door at that moment. So I ended up living in Brisbane on and off for 5 years, back and forth between the United States, and until finally we decided to call it quits. And yeah, and I was going to go back to America, and a friend of mine said, I'm going up to Noosa for the weekend. Why don't you come with me? And back in those days, all they had was the old Bruce Highway, which was 2 lanes. And to get from Brisbane to Noosa, it took about 4 hours driving, which now it's about an hour and 45 minutes with the new highways. But so yeah, we drove up here, and they took me to the national park, which if anybody listening has been to the national park, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the minute I walked into the Noosa National Park, I felt something. Like I knew that I was home, the place that I was meant to be on Earth, which is a beautiful feeling.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it is truly stunning there. Really stunning.
It is. And it's not just the way it looks. It's got the real, you know, vibration to it that I'm sure the indigenous people of this area, I'm sure they felt it for forever.
Yeah.
It's such a magical place, really. And it's still, even though progress is coming, it's still an amazing place.
So it would have been very small at that point, the town.
At the time, there were about 5 or 6,000 permanent residents in all of Noosa Shire.
Mhm.
Now it's getting close to 60,000. So yeah, it was a lot different back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you started working in restaurants, is that right?
I was working as a waiter
Mhm.
and bartender. Yep. In a
Mhm.
restaurant. I got a job and lived just down the street from the national park. So I went to Tea Tree Bay every morning to wake up and had a swim.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I started working in the restaurants, or a restaurant. Annabelle's restaurant's not there anymore.
And so how did you end up going from being a waiter to a magician?
Well, at the time when I was working at Annabelle's, there was another waiter there whose grandfather had been a magician, and he knew a few tricks, just a couple. He wasn't a magician or anything, but he knew a few tricks. And he was doing the behind the bar. And I hadn't really done magic since I was young, since I was 11 or 12. But it was like back then, it was my main hobby. It was my passion back then. And he kind of reignited it. John Phelan is his name, to give credit where it's due. And he was doing tricks, and I thought I can do some tricks. So I started doing tricks behind the bar too, and got a really good reaction from it. When I finally decided that I'd met my wife Carol, or my ex-wife Carol, and I finally decided that we were going to live in Noosa and raise a family, I had to go back to the United States to organize all my visa and all this stuff. So I had a job as a bartender in the United States, and I was doing magic behind the bar every night, like solid. I just started doing it again and learning all these new tricks, and that was a real uh, what do you call it, proving ground for me, because when you work in a bar, you come across every kind of person, every lifestyle, every socioeconomic group. We had Hell's Angels coming in, we had movie stars coming in, uh, and so I was dealing with every kind of person, which is a great training for anybody who's going to be performing or working with the general public. As you know,
Mm.
I'm sure you have a few funny road stories,
Yeah, they're still
working
awaiting.
in bars and pubs and whatnot.
Yeah, they're still awaiting therapy. Like the one
Yeah,
a wedding out
yeah,
in Western Queensland comes to mind, but we
exactly,
don't have to go
exactly.
there.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I really got a good training in that regard so that I could deal with and get along with every different kind of people. That was the main thing, because I know that like comedians, a big part of their deal is how to deal with hecklers. And I've had a few hecklers in my life as well,
Yeah.
but I've never been the kind of person that can heckle back. Like, I can't do the battle thing. It's just not in my DNA. I've tried it a couple times, and it's always not good.
Mm, mm,
So I learned, um, a different way, which I'm sure you would understand. It's an energy exchange where you accept where people are coming from. Usually, when people are giving you a hard time, they're either looking for attention, which is fine. I can give people attention when they need it, and I can work them into the show, and then they get what they want. There's other people that are just angry. And anger, I have found in my experience that anger always comes from a place of pain. And so, accepting that somebody's in pain and trying to emphasize with that and deal with it from that angle, I found I get a lot more success than, coming up hard against it.
yeah.
So, yeah, just, I don't know what the question was.
But the question was about how did we go from being a waiter to a magician,
Oh,
and
right. Yes.
I
Right.
imagine it was being behind the bar and doing magic tricks. I imagine it was good for
Yes.
you.
Yeah. And but then on the other side, being behind the bar, I also had to be a bartender, which it's hard work.
Yeah.
And I was here in Noosa, and I decided to try a form of busking, not exactly busking, but I decided to try something in the restaurants. Enough of the people knew me in the restaurants that they allowed me to come in their restaurants to approach the tables. I wasn't actually busking for tips. I was actually telling them, I'm going to do a show for you and you're going to pay me this amount of money. I
Mm.
did that with a little menu of magic so they could choose tricks off the menu and they knew how much it was going to cost. And so I started doing that. The first night I did it, which was in 1984, I made $100, which in 84, $100 was like a week's rent or more, really. And I thought, well, that's a fluke. So the next night I went out, and I still have my job as a waiter. The next night I went out and I made it over $100, and I thought, okay, that's it. And I gave my notice, and that's when I became a full-time professional magician.
Ah,
I never looked back.
yeah. And was there, I'm always curious about inner critic work, particularly that's something that I've had to navigate for myself. But so was there a sense of being an imposter or anything like that when you first started getting?
Um, that's interesting because I'm sure you get this too, but in my field in particular, because people don't often have the experience of a live magician standing right in front of them and entertaining them personally, um, they it 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 it's people can really blow it up into something more than it is. And I have gotten so much adulation and applause and so many people just saying, "Oh, you're amazing, you're the best, you're the most fantastic magician that ever lived," et cetera, et cetera. I mean, on and on and on, which uh, there's a danger of believing it. But I've always, I know who the best magicians are, and I've always kept myself in check. Okay, I know where I am. I know that I have skills because I work really hard at it.
Mm.
But I also know that anybody could do what I do if they just put the time in. So in that regard, I I've I can't say that I felt like an imposter, although no, there have been times that I felt like an imposter. Yeah, I still do sometimes, but it's only because I know that I'm not the best magician in the world.
Mm.
I'm good enough. I
Hmm.
can do a really good job and I can make people really happy. And that's the important thing to me. It's
Yeah.
not about how good I am, really.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
I think it's a powerful place to get to that point where you go, actually,
it is.
I'm good
Yeah,
enough.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And also it's a matter of having what your focus is. Like some people need to think that they are the best one or to think that they are, somehow great or whatever. And I don't really need that. I've never really wanted that. For me, my focus is how am I making these people feel? And if I'm making them feel really good, then I've won, if you know what I mean. And
Mm.
that's the important thing. It's not really about me. It's about them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something I've seen you do many, many times is, well, create wonderment and awe at what you've been able to do, but that it's about making people feel good through what it is that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where a lot of like I occasionally meet people who hate magicians because they came across the wrong magician in
Mm.
their life. There are a lot of magicians, not all of them, but there are a lot that it's all about them. It's like, look what I can do. You can't do it, but I can, which I've never ever wanted to think that way. For
Mm.
me, the way that I feel successful is if I can create something magical, or if we can create something magical together. I rarely take credit for it. I say, look what we did. Look what you did. Look what just happened while we were together. I try not to take credit for it.
Mm.
I don't need to. I mean, I know I'm going to get credit for it anyway, so I don't need to. But for me, it's to make it that we created the magic, because in reality, that is what happened. We did create it together. Without you or without the people watching, there's no magic.
Yeah.
There's just me sitting there fooling around with coins and cards and things.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned about anybody could do it if they put the time in. And so how long does it take you to learn is a trick the right word to use?
Yeah, trick, illusion, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I don't like the word trick is because some people think, oh, he's tricking me. And that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
But so it has that negative connotation, but I don't mind. It's a
Mm-hmm.
magic trick, so that's cool.
Yeah.
But it's an
Let's
illusion.
call it an
It
illusion.
looks like magic.
Yeah.
It looks like what magic would look like. Some things, because of my skill level, because I've been at it for 40 years, some things I can pick up quite quickly. But when I find a new trick that really challenges me, I can take up to 3 months of practicing every day for hours every day before I am ready to show it to anyone.
Mm.
So it depends on how hard it is, really. But having said that, if anybody's interested in doing magic, you don't have to have a high skill level. You can do the simplest magic, and if you present it the right way, it blows people's minds. I still do some tricks that I learned in children's magic books years and years ago that are so simple and so easy, but presented the right way, crazy magic. Yeah.
Yeah, you've taught my daughter a few magic tricks along the way. So, and I remember she loved them. She loved them. So
I do enjoy. I don't teach very much magic, but if somebody shows a real interest, I'll show them one trick. And if they practice a little bit and, put the effort in, then I'll show them something else. But most people, they practice for a minute and don't do it right and then give up. And it's interesting because, like, I know a lot of musicians who say to me, oh, I wish I could do what you do. And I wish I could do what you do in
yeah.
playing the guitar. But the thing is, the reason we're good at what we do is because we have the passion for it. It's like, I don't have to say, oh, I better practice today. I have to practice. I just practice all the time because I love doing it. And I'm
Mm.
sure you're the same. You've got your guitars sitting right there. I'm sure you just pick them up and play them. Not because you think, oh, I've got to practice now. Or maybe, I don't know, I'm putting words into your mouth. But most musicians that I know, they're always playing because they love playing. And
Yeah.
that's how you get good at something. So it's not, the secret isn't to get good at something you just want to do. It's finding the thing that you want to do and then get good at it.
Yeah.
Or the thing that you don't have to force yourself to do, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I often come from the place where it's not hard, but it requires time and focus. And so if I want to do something, for example, doing podcasts, right? Lots of people go, too much work, right? Or it's too hard. There's too much to it, where all the different layers of what it requires, all I have to do is just time and focus. And discomfort might come up when I'm in that process. So when you talked about people just trying the magic trick and it doesn't work, so they just give up, that's the discomfort. And so if I can stay with the discomfort, maintain the focus across time, the discomfort will back off and the skill set will develop. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And again, like when I'm learning a new trick, I go through a lot of discomfort at first. Very frustrating. But if I have ever seen anybody else do it, I know that I can do it.
Yeah,
And that's what pushes me through.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And so do you know have you heard of the conscious competence learning matrix?
I don't think so.
It's quite a long term, but it's that diagram, and I've just pulled it up here in front of me so I can cheat a little bit. But you start with unconscious incompetence. So, for example, I don't know the magic trick exists. And then I see someone do the magic trick. It sparks my interest. And then I move into conscious incompetence when I try and do it. And I go, oh, I can't do this. And then as I'm trying to learn it, I'm in this phase of conscious incompetence. So I'm aware I'm not good at it. And that's when most people quit, is the conscious incompetence phase. And then as they spend their time and attention developing the skill that goes into conscious competence, where it's like, oh, I can see I'm good at this, but I still have to concentrate. And then, of course, it goes into unconscious competence, where all of a sudden you're doing these magic tricks and don't even know how they're happening.
That's such a beautiful place to get to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I think it's so crucial, just getting through that conscious incompetence phase. If people can stick through with that, then they're going to be able to get to the place where it's integrated and it's not hard anymore.
So true. And then when you get to the conscious competence and you're doing it without thinking about it, that's when you can concentrate on the energy exchange of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Or not concentrate on it, but to, that's such an important thing.
Yeah. And what does that feel like to you when you're in that space?
I guess when I'm really hitting the zone and I know that we're all on the same page and we're all in the same, because like you said, when I get to that point where I'm not thinking about the magic, I'm seeing the magic too. And that's the thing a lot of people don't understand about a magician. Magicians, or for me anyway, when I started doing magic, it's because I loved watching magic. But once you become a magician and you know how everything is done, you don't get to see the magic anymore because you know. And that's when, even if I do know what I'm doing, I still feel the magic, but I feel it from the audience. I know what they're experiencing and I can enjoy it that way. So we have to give up the thing we love in order to share it with other people. But then through that sharing, we receive back that energy and that feeling of wonder and all that stuff just by seeing it in their eyes and all of that. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that perspective. And I know for me, when I go to watch musicians play, and I know so much about what's happening on stage and the technical pieces and all those kind of things, that my logical brain is quite present, and it can take quite a bit to shift the logical brain and become so aware of the subtleties of sound and things like that, that it's, when I first started, I'd go to a show and just be blown away every night. Whereas now there's that real, I'm guessing we're getting past the prefrontal cortex, which is the kind of blocking and the judgment and the things like that, to actually experience fully what's happening. And I love that perspective of that you get to experience it through the audience.
And it can be quite overwhelming as well. And I had a really wise guy tell me many, many years ago, because I talked to him about it, how sometimes I got really overwhelmed just by all the energy that was coming at me. And he said, you just have to see it this way, that it's passing through you. You don't let it stop in the middle of you, let it come into your heart, but it also passes out the other way. And that way you can experience it, but without, just building up all this crazy energy and exploding.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it can be quite daunting having that audience coming in and then not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I imagine that working in a bar, being surrounded by alcohol, working late nights, all that kind of thing, and I know from your notes, right? But then that alcohol would be something, and I've seen that somebody said to me the other day, why do musicians always get led astray? Right? I said, well, you know what? It's people, you go see a movie and it's about Freddie Mercury or it's about Elton John. They're not making the movies, unless you watch Wolf of Wall Street, right? But they're not making movies about your regular business person who's having these alcohol issues, or any person, right? Somebody, a stay-at-home dad or a stay-at-home mom or whatever it might be. You're not seeing those in the movies. And so there's this perception that it's just the performers that are being impacted by that. And so that impacted you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I think all my life in the hospitality trade, because I was in it for a lot of years, hospitality trade really is a big risk of alcoholism because, like you said, for one thing, you're surrounded by alcohol and people who are drinking and having a good time. And then you work really hard all night and then you have a knockoff drink. And for me, when I was working as a magician, I was working in there were only, I don't know, 10 restaurants in Hastings Street. And I was going from one to the other. And after work, I could go to any restaurant and have free alcohol every night with my friends who were all knocking off and sitting around for a couple hours drinking and laughing and talking about the stuff that happened and unwinding. So yeah, free alcohol is a real danger because when you're paying for it, at least you're regulated in some way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty free all the time. And people wanted to buy me drinks all the time, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a problem for me. Yeah. And as I said, I had been, a drug taker and a stoner all my life since I was about 14. So this was just, another thing to, I don't know what I was pushing down exactly, but there was something that I was repressing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you come to be at the place where you weren't drinking anymore?
Well, I tried to quit for years, like just through willpower, and I just couldn't do it. And I was drinking every day, every night. Not every day. I was a functioning alcoholic. I didn't drink during the day, but every night I drank until I was drunk, and or all the alcohol was gone. And I tried and tried to quit, but I just couldn't do it. And just to backtrack a little bit on another turning point in my life,
Mm.
after doing magic in a small town for 20 years, I was pretty famous here and all over Australia. I was, traveling around television, doing all this stuff, magazine covers, all this stuff. And everywhere I went, people knew me as Sean the magician. And like it got to a point where if I went to a party or I went, to a social event or whatever, and somebody who didn't know me said, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" I started lying because if I said I was a magician, immediately that would be the rest of the conversation for the rest of the night. And most people, and I don't blame anybody, but they all ask the same 10 questions.
Mm.
How did you start? Where do you learn new tricks? And it's okay. I'm okay with that. But it was like I started thinking, well, who am I? Because I'm not just Sean the magician. I'm somebody without that. And I really had absolutely no concept of who I was. And I quit being a magician for 3 years. And I got a job in a bookshop and I became bookshop guy. And after, sort of 3 years, and I realized how much I love doing magic, and I was able to see it from a different perspective. In the bookshop one day, a book came in. It was Alan Carr's How to Control Alcohol. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to control alcohol. I just want to have one drink. So I took the book home and I read it and finished it at 3 a.m. And at the very end of the book, he says, by the way, I kind of tricked you. You can't control alcohol. The only way to control it is to not drink it.
Mm.
But the information in the book was so clear and was so profound to me that I never wanted another drink again. And that was 17 years ago. And it's not that I had to try not to drink or anything. I just never, ever thought I want to drink. I don't I don't ever want to drink again. I never have.
Mm.
So that was really a huge, huge turning point for me. That was right around the time when I split up with my wife, and I was a year being single again, just trying to figure out who I was as not a married couple after 23 years of marriage. And I should say that we split up amicably. My wife Carol is a wonderful person, and we still good friends and still spend time together and have our family holidays together and all that, which I'm really grateful for. But you know, we just grew in different directions. I wanted to have one future, and she wanted to have a different future, and that's no reason why we shouldn't both have the future we wanted. But anyway, so after a year, I ended up in another relationship with someone that you know, actually, a special lady, and she had just gotten out of a difficult relationship, and we decided to have a conscious relationship, which with open communication and just open-hearted love. And this was the very first time in my life that I'd ever had a relationship where drugs and alcohol were not involved. So that's the point I'm making. Was that really not drinking alcohol was just a huge impact on how I was in a relationship. And man, what a difference. I mean, that's a book of conversations, really.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it changed the way I have relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And speaking of books, so you've written 6, and I'm a big
Yeah.
of your writing. I
Yeah.
love your
I
writing.
have.
I don't think you must have released a few since I think I've
Yeah.
read 3 or 4 of yours.
Yeah. You've probably read 3.
3, right?
Probably.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was thinking today, I don't have them here on the bookshelf, and that's because so I'm in Sydney. They're at my parents' house in Brisbane in a box, and I thought,
That's okay.
books. Well, I love reading them, and every time I read your books, I get something different out of them. And the ones I'm thinking of, they're I don't know if this is the best description, but they're conscious narratives, and something that you do very well is write insightfully, creating a narrative for people to get an insight into their own experience.
Yeah. My first book, The Roadless Traveler, which was the most of what you're talking about. It was actually, I was writing it at the end of my marriage, and I was writing it about what I was going through at the time as far as wanting to, the book, The Power of Now, had just come out, and I was just rereading that and rereading it. It really affected me in a big way. And so when I was writing this book, it was about, I was kind of creating my own future. I was thinking, this is the way I want to live from now on, being in the present and whatnot. And it's a fun, quirky, crazy story about a guy who's learning how to be more present, basically. But as you said, most people that have read it have said exactly what you said, that they read it and they really feel something from it. It brings them into the present by reading it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and for people listening, there'll be links in the show notes to Sean's books.
Good.
So the something that I remember having a conversation with you is we hadn't spent a lot of time together, and we bump into each other every year at this festival called Winter Moon Festival. And I remember we started having a conversation, and you said to me, I don't really like doing small talk. And I was relieved, actually. I was like, oh, great, great. And you said, what's been your biggest insight from the last 12 months?
Wow.
Yeah.
I said that?
You did. And it just took the conversation to a much deeper level. And there was somebody else there, maybe it was Nadia Sunday, and we all started sharing what had happened. So question for you, what's been your biggest insight from the last 12 months?
Well, before I answer that, I'd just like to give you credit, because I wouldn't ask that question of just anyone, because I do small talk, It's not my favorite thing to do, but I know how to do it, and I do it. We all do it. But when I meet someone like you, who I can feel is going to respond to a question like that, that is, so you inspired me to ask that question. So thank you for that.
I hear this, the
My biggest
magician coming
insight
through
this
here.
year. Wow, this year. Well, I guess in the past year and a half, 2 years, I've actually retired, and I'm still doing magic because I love it and I'll always do it. It's my art, it's my creative outlet, all that. But I don't have to do it for money anymore, which was it was never my main focus, wasn't the money, but obviously I had to make a living. So I was constantly thinking, where am I going to work? When am I going to get a job? So I taking jobs that I didn't particularly want to do, but did them because the money was really good. So I guess my biggest insight is that some people, when they retire, they kind of I don't know, find themselves lost as to what am I going to do now? What's my life going to be like? But for me, as long as I can walk on the beach every day, I'm happy. And I guess my biggest insight is that I have everything I need. I have everything I want, and I'm content, and I'm grateful for that. And I feel that as long as I'm grateful for what I have and content with what I have, well, for me, that's happiness. I've won.
Mm,
I've found it. I'm not seeking anymore. I'm there. This is it.
mm, yeah. And as I hear you saying that, I'm picturing that moment of you getting to Noosa and feeling that sense of home. And now that you're retired and the the traditional work life that you were doing, which wasn't quite traditional,
Not
but
really traditional, but
yeah, yeah. And that's shifted as far as your focus goes, that it's the sense of place and being able to walk on the beach that is helping you
Mm,
have that gratitude and contentment.
mm, yes.
Mm, mm. I'm going to look through my questions here and see if I've missed any.
Yeah. There was one other turning point. It's probably one of the
Yep,
biggest turning
yep.
points in my life that I did want to talk about.
Mhm.
And it is while I was a magician. So after I'd been a magician for 20 years or so, and after the bookshop, I came back and I got a job for 13 years in a particular restaurant, working for some wonderful people, Christian Paz Tershwell. And I was working there, and I was having a good time, and I generally have a good time while I'm working, but it's also really hard work to go for 3 hours straight, talking to people, entertaining people, uh, um, manipulating their energy, for a better, better way of saying it, um, in a good way. And but it was hard work. And at that time, I had entered another relationship which lasted for 5 years with one of my best friends, Tilly Hinton, and we transitioned from being in a romantic relationship just to a friendship. And I was alone again, and after 5 years, so I went through a period of grief over the end of the relationship, as you do. And I started questioning, again, who I was and what I was doing here and why I was here. And I had no idea what my purpose in life was and what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And it was like really troubling me. And I remember one night I had to go to work, and I was in tears. I was just feeling so down and so depressed. And I was just saying, just tell me what I'm here for. What's my purpose? Just tell me, just give me a sign, anything. And I was, looking up at the universe and say, please just tell me and I'll do it. I don't. And I think everybody has that feeling that they want a purpose in life. I mean, it's a main human trait, is to want to know why you exist. And I almost called in and said, I can't make it tonight. I can't put on the mask tonight. But I went in because the show must go on. And I got started working. And anytime I was feeling down, as soon as I started working and meeting people and feeling that great energy, it always buoyed me and, brought me back. But this one night, there was a table of about 10 people. And at one end was a young woman, about 21, 22, and a group of older people with quite an old person at the other end, a woman. And I went up and did my show, and I could see that this young lady, she was, mentally challenged, or whatever you call it, whatever the politically correct thing was. She wasn't, there was something going on, which for me, I kind of, I don't know, I gravitate towards that because it's almost more of a childlike nature, which is perfect for magic in some ways. And I started doing, and everybody there was kind of pointing me towards her. So I started mainly entertaining her and involving her in all the magic. And everybody had a great time, and I had a great time, and I was feeling much better. And just as I was about to say, okay, well, thank you very much, and walk away, this young woman grabbed me by the arm, like physically, and held me. And she pulled me towards her. And it's like, in the movies when something happens and everything else disappears around you and you're just, in that zone where you're just with that person. And she was just looking right at me and saying, your magic is wonderful. The magic you do is wonderful. You made me feel so good. I feel so great because of your magic. You made me feel so fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for making me feel so good. It was just, and it went on like for 5 minutes. It was really long. And I was kind of thinking in my mind, okay, I get the message. This is the sign. I got it. I understand what you're saying. Thank you. Now I got it. And finally we finished, and I was walking away, and the grandmother at the other end of the table called me over, and she said, oh my gosh, look at her. She's so happy. You made her so happy. Thank you for making her so happy. And then she said she's got a brain tumor and she won't be alive very much longer. But you really made her so happy tonight. And that was probably one of the biggest turning points in my life, because I realized what my purpose was. And the funny thing is, my purpose was what I've been doing all along. I already was doing my purpose. But from that point on, I've never approached it any other way, except this is what I'm here for. And this is what I'm here to do. And even now, I'm only working a couple of times a month. I know that when I'm called to do, whatever booking I do get or take, I know why I'm going to that booking, and I know what my purpose is and why I'm here. And it's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah.
I should have brought some tissues. I knew I was going to cry.
I have some here, but it's not very easy.
That's not going to help
the camera. Yeah, thank you. I can feel
a
myself.
Powerful moment. A powerful moment.
Yeah, it's interesting, those moments that happen where there's a human connection, but then there's this conscious expansion and presence that can happen, and it's such a rare thing. But for myself, when you tell that story, I go, yes, of course, the purpose is whatever we're doing. And sometimes it's so easy to get lost and be attached to the end point instead of being attached, well, not even attached, being present with this moment. And if I'm rejecting this moment, what am I truly rejecting? And if I can navigate to a place of presence and surrender, there I am. There's the purpose. The purpose is me, and I am the purpose. And that you would being you in this life form, this way around of living as a human, you're being you.
And just by doing the thing that brings you joy.
Yeah.
It's the one thing we can do that will affect the whole world. Is to do the thing that brings you joy.
Yeah. It's so true, right? Because when you're doing the thing that brings you joy, that impacts everybody around you. You're a better person to be around. You're more likely to make money and appreciate money and be happy with what you have, and be happy with what you don't have, because you're already happy in what you're doing. I'm thinking of Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he has that book, The Honeymoon Effect, which is
I don't know that one.
Yeah. Well, effectively, when we love what we're doing, the same chemicals are activated in our brain as when we fall in love with something.
Right. Yes.
And so if we just keep doing what we love doing, we have that honeymoon effect, which then permeates all our other areas of life.
So true.
Yeah. Well, Sean, doing what you love doing has had such a positive influence on me, and also just spending time with you. I just love it. So thank you so much for
right back at you
today.
Thank you. Before we go though, and you mentioned, I think you mentioned my mother at the beginning, and
yes,
her
yeah,
I just have to give her full credit, because she brought me up in a way that opened me to curiosity and adventure and acceptance and all the things that that made me what I am today.
Yeah. And there's a wonderful video of Sean's mother on YouTube which Sean, you recorded?
No, it was recorded by the company, by the parachuting company. But on her 86th or her 85th birthday, she just wanted to parachute. She'd never done it before, and she wanted to do it. It's a great video. I think it's really inspirational.
I'm putting a note here I'll put a link for that in the show notes. Really worth watching. 85-year-old grandmother. Is grandmother, great grandmother at that point?
Yeah. And she went with my son, James, actually. He also went with her. Yeah.
Yeah. What a great adventure to have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really great video. And the music.
Yeah. And the doctors told her, we went to the doctors and they all said, don't do it. You probably won't make it. And she said, I don't care. What a way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And my perspective is you feel more alive. Your body will be more alive after having an experience like that out of your comfort zone. I love jumping out of an airplane. I'm due to do it again. I haven't done it for quite a long time. I think I'm due to do it again.
Have you done it with your daughter?
No, she refuses. I've tried. And it's a joke every birthday and Christmas that I'm going to buy a skydiving ticket. And no, it doesn't go down well.
Right.
So yeah, it could be a solo trip, but it's I just love the sense of after doing something like that, then I have this feeling that, I can do anything. And the science is there these days now that if you're avoiding something, do something harder, and then it'll be easier to come back and do the thing you're avoiding. Yeah. So yeah, after jumping out of a plane, the first time I did it, I remember that for about probably 3-4 weeks, I was a bit reckless because I just thought I can do anything. And one of the things was, locked out of the house, so I climbed up the scaffolding of the place next door and then leapt across the gap and into a window, which my sister was horrified. And then the next day, massive surf, ridiculously big surf, and going out in that and getting taught a lesson. But even then, it still didn't touch me because I jumped out of a plane. And it might be time to do that again. Yeah. Well, Sean, thank you so much. Lovely to have a chat.
Pleasure. A
And
pleasure.
if you're listening to this podcast and curious about Sean's books, I highly, highly recommend. They're they're insightful, but they're also a great experience to read and entertaining. And
Thank you.
you might bump into the Noosa magician sometime if you're floating around Noosa and you see a magician in a restaurant. That's Sean. So yeah, well, thank you, Sean, and I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Same. Okay.
All right, much love.
We will.
Yeah,
All right. Love you, buddy.
yeah, love you too. Congratulations, you made the end of the podcast. Thanks for staying with us. Would love to hear your comments and insights if you have any. Please feel free to do that in the comments box below, and press subscribe, ring the bell. It's always wonderful to have an audience that come back, and your insights in the comments are valuable to other people. So please feel free to share those, because the insights that we have, we're human, and it's all part of the human experience. So your insights go to adding value to others. So please feel free to comment. If you're interested, I have an amazing inner critic quiz that I've set up. And in that quiz, you explore aspects of your own inner critic which may be blocking you from taking action, or self-sabotage, or feeling not good enough, or perfectionism, or imposter syndrome. And what you do is you go, you answer the questions. It takes less than 3 minutes, and what you get is firstly your result, which has 6 aspects of the inner critic and how you rank on those aspects. And the other piece that you'll get is straight into your inbox is a 20-page report, and it's personalized to you. So it'll have your results, and it'll have the 6 aspects and how you're ranked for those aspects, as well as strategies for working with those aspects of the inner critic. I've tried to create a really valuable tool for you, and feedback is that it's a fantastic tool. Check it out. Would really love to hear what you think of that tool, and also it's proving very powerful. I'm getting lots of feedback that people are saying, oh, I was stuck on this and I did the quiz, and now I see that I was caught up in self-sabotage, and the strategies to how to work with that are there, and people are using those strategies and moving forward. I'd love that for you too, if you're feeling that you're blocked in some way. Sending my love. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell. Love for you to click on the inner critic quiz and get something out of that too. See you again sometime.